Archer was born in Liverpool on the 8th of June 1863. His father, Richard, was a Bajan ship's steward. His mother, Mary Teresa, an Irish woman. He had a brother, Arthur, and a sister, Mary. The family lived in the long-demolished, poor working-class Blake Street in Liverpool, densely populated with labourers and tradespeople from a variety of backgrounds, predominantly Irish and many Jewish. It was situated at the bottom of Mount Pleasant, at the foot of Brownlow Hill. His views began to be shaped when his parents took him as a child to see a play based on the influential anti-slavery novel Uncle Tom's Cabin. Its greatest American hero was to be John Brown, who tried to stimulate a slave revolt at Harper's Ferry. I'm sure we can imagine John singing John Brown's Body, which had been such an important song of the Northern armies in the American Civil War. Little is known about his childhood and youth or his family life. The family disappears from view by 1871. Perhaps they went to live in Barbados. He may then have been a sailor travelling around the Atlantic and a medical student. He didn't smoke or drink alcohol. He read and believed in the continuing value of learning. We know nothing about Margaret up to this point because no mention has been found of her maiden name nor of a marriage certificate in Canada. When John and Margaret settled in Battersea, it was an interesting place to be. The railway line from Clapham Junction to Vauxhall divided it between the largely working class area in the north and the more affluent south. It had been the centre of a wave of strikes and trade union organisation known as the New Unionism from 1889, in which Battersea socialist John Burns was key figure. Archer attended the Pan-African Conference held in Westminster Town Hall in 1900. Conference organiser Henry Sylvester Williams had lived in Canada, and when he arrived in England, he got a job as a temperance lecturer, including speaking at Battersea St Mary's Parish Church. John became a member of the executive committee of the Pan-African Association that was set up at the conference along with the black composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor. At some stage, the Archers moved into 55 Brimley Road around the corner from Battersea Park Road off Prince of Wales Drive. In the 1901 census, John is recorded as a professional singer, but no evidence of him as such has been found under his name, though it's possible he used a stage name. By 1906, he had become a professional photographer, first at 208 and then 214 Battersea Park Road. Very few photographs credited to John have been found, apart from those used in the annual reports of the Trades Council before the First World War and in Battersea School Sports Association annual reports. By September 1906, he seems to have become a member of the Battersea Labour League. John had become prominent enough to be a leading public speaker at and chairman of pre-election meetings at Battersea Park. In the November election that year, he topped the Latchmere ward poll with 1,051 votes and became a councillor for 3 years. The Progressives won a majority. John played his part on council committees. Two of the interesting issues that came up during the 3 years were the future of Battersea Rise House and the Brown Dog statue. Battersea Rise House, which had been located on the corner of today's Camford and Muncaster Road, had been the centre of the Clapham sect of anti-slavery and evangelical activists like William Wilberforce at the end of the 18th and early 19th centuries. In 1907, the estate was purchased by Edwin Evans, the state agent, property developer and conservative municipal reformer. He planned to build a new housing estate. He offered to sell to the council the house and a portion of the grounds for the benefit of the public. Archer supported the resolution for non-purchase, arguing, quote, that the credit for the abolition of slavery was mainly due to Granville Sharp and not Wilberforce. The meeting opposed purchase and the council decided not to. A voluntary fundraising committee failed to raise the purchase price, and Evans had the house demolished. The other issue followed on from London medical students trying to damage a statue of a brown dog that the council had allowed to be erected on Latchmere Estate recreation ground by the anti-vivisection movement. The movement had a strong following in Battersea because of the work of its hospital near the park. A public meeting in support of the Brown Dog Memorial was called at the Town Hall for Monday the 13th of January 1908. John moved the resolution, refusing to remove either statue or the anti-vivisection inscription on it. Charlotte Despard, the socialist and campaigner for women's votes, talked about the inhumanity of vivisection. Medical students who tried to disrupt the meeting were unceremoniously bundled out by the stewards. The period 1906-9 saw increasing frictions and split within the alliance and campaigning against the progressives by the Marxist Social Democrats and the Independent Labour Party. In the November 2009 election, the splits meant that there were competing sets of candidates, allowing the Conservative municipal reformers to win. John lost, along with most progressive candidates. Little is known about John's activities between 1909 and 12. He and Margaret attended the funeral of their friend, the composer Samuel Coleridge Taylor. And in November 1912, he was re-elected as part of the progressive majority, regaining control of the council. John was elected mayor for the year November 1913 to November 1914. The role of the mayor was to chair the council and usually town meetings. He stressed what he regarded as the significance of his election. His election was reported in the United States in the Chicago Defender, the New York Daily People, the Freeman, and the New York Age. The Negro Yearbook for 1914 records it. He received hundreds of letters of congratulations, including from the United States. He had to ask his friend James Wilson, who lived in Garrett Lane, to help him with the replies. The letters from the States included one from the black judge Robert Terrell, the editor of the Chicago Defender, Haley Q. Brown, Joseph Garner of the YMCA in Pittsburgh, Caesar Taylor, author of the book The Conflict and Coming of the Racists, and J.W. Crumble, secretary of the American Negro Academy. One of its founders, W.E.B. Du Bois, had been at the 1900 Pan-African Conference, and on his visits to Britain, visited Coleridge Taylor. John began a long correspondence with John Bruce, the president of the Negro Society for Historical Research in New York. Archer said, "It's particularly pleasing to me to read that the fact of my election will encourage you over in America, where for so many years you have been suffering the injustice of inequality, and not because of lack of brains, but because of the racial prejudice that predominates the generality of the whites of your country." Archer asked Bruce to obtain a copy for him of the book The History of the Negro Race by George W. Williams. Williams had helped expose the Belgian atrocities in the Congo. John said that the letters and the books on Negro history that he was sent, quote, "inspire me with great hope and incentive to uphold the dignity of our race, who I feel sure will ultimately survive the prejudices of a race who, for 250 years, have subordinated them and kept them out of their just right." He then compared Negro development with that of English civilization. It took England, with all its boasted civilization, over 1,000 years to produce a Shakespeare. Scotland, its Bobby Burns, Ireland, its Daniel O'Connell, and Wales, its Lord George. It couldn't be expected that the Negro in 50 years since emancipation in the States could reach such a standard of morality, civilization, and education that it has taken them more than 1,000 years to obtain. He then explained that he stood for mayor because the Anglo-American exhibition was to be opened at White City. We can assume that he visited the exhibition, and there he was seen performing the band from the Jenkins Orphanage. He may have been one of the 9 London councillors who called on the band's organiser, Reverend David Jenkins. Someone in America had sent him a calendar titled "What Cheer Dedicated to Our 50th Anniversary of Freedom, Factors in Our Progress." It was a picture calendar with a coloured child in the centre, labelled Our Hope. It gave comparative information of the first 50 years from the end of American slavery. He hung it in his office at the town hall under photographs of Black Americans and others. In January 1914, Jane Roberts, the widow of the first president of Liberia, who lived with John and Margaret, died. They had met at the 1900 Pan-African Conference. John told Bruce, quote, "Robert's last day at Happy. She was very dear to us, and we feel her loss very acutely. She was buried in Creighton Cemetery on Garrett Lane. John's intention to purchase a memorial stone did not happen, presumably because he could not afford it. He told Bruce that her death had had an adverse effect on him. Quote, "You can therefore understand how troubled in mind I have been and have the heart to do only that which my official duties demanded. Being mayor was costly," as John explained to Bruce. "I'm unfortunately not possessed of much of this world's goods, and my elevation to the office of mayor is making heavy inroads upon my slender purse." As mayor, he faced real problems from constant sniping by municipal reformers and the Social Democrat Independent Labour Party alliance. His mayoral duties included attending events organised by local organisations. After an official visit to Battersea Chapel in York Road on the 21st of December 1913, he broke with tradition by refusing to accept invitations to church services, because the visit might be thought to confer dignity on a particular church or chapel. As a Catholic, his refusal was not due to a religious objection. He attended functions of many charitable organisations, along with the Anglican Reverend Foster Pegg. On the 15th of January, he chaired a town meeting about the problems of the way London County Council administered the scheme for feeding needy school children, and the unsuitable and unsafe condition of many of the premises used. He declined to be a member of the proposed delegation to the LCC because he didn't think that his involvement would help gain its objective. The council believed in him. The last period of John's mayoral year saw the beginning of the First World War in August. He attended the march-off of the 23rd Battalion recruited from Battersea men. He launched an appeal for funds to relieve the distress caused locally by the war. Despite drenching rain, a large procession marched through the main streets to draw attention to the appeal. A banner read, "Battersea supports the mayor's appeal." He was able to use the ground for the anti-vivisection hospital for a fundraising event. The war increased the duties of all mayors. All Battersea councillors formally agreed at the end of his year to thank him, quote, "for the care and attention which he had so ungrudgingly, owing to the national crisis, undertaken his duties that greatly increased and involved money and considerable personal sacrifice." Cross-party public activists made their own presentation to it. The Catholic priest, Father Kelly, said the characteristic of all John's public work had been his thought for the bottom dog, while Charlotte Despard said that he and Margaret had done a great deal to help women workers during the war. Expecting that the war would end quickly, John hoped that his successor would preside over a meeting to celebrate the declaration of peace and urged him to campaign to obtain money for the strike in Battersea. He returned to life as an ordinary councillor. He was also on the Poor Law Guardians, and in April he advocated payment of more bonuses to council and guardians employees especially those on active service. In one speech, he said that he would never have gone to France, but there were men who thought it was their duty to go, and among them were some of the men who it was now proposed to exclude from receiving war bonuses. He was against anti-German xenophobia. In July 1916, the Council considered a resolution from Pan-African Council calling for the detention of all persons of enemy birth, whether naturalised or not. John opposed. If the war was a righteous war, it was because we believed in upholding a scrap of paper which conferred the privilege of English birthright on foreigners who become naturalised. If this resolution were carried into effect, what would become of our honour with respect? With an implied dig at the royal family, he asked if it was proposed to intern all enemy aliens, irrespective of whether they were of royal blood or not. In March 1917, an objection was raised that the Guardians would stop paying relief to women who had married children. John didn't see why the women should be punished. There was a possibility that their husbands were more patriotic than some of the people who were born here. In April 1917, the board discussed only buying British or colonial goods. John opposed. Protection, besides being unjust and unfair when a political truce had been declared by a higher body, this motion was really meant to aim at the German nation. He has strong views about price rises and profiteering. In February 1917, the Council debated the price and quality of coal. It seconded the resolution for inquiry into coal supply, which wanted to also assess who were making high profits. In July, we suggested that if all the borough councils of London demanded the right to supply coal, the government could not stand against them. In a council debate in April 1918 on raising wages, which was proposed by local traders, John said, "Traders have made more money in the last 4 years than they did in the 6 before the war." During 1918, using the new National Labour Party constitution, the pro-Labour progressives and their former socialist critics joined together to form Battersea Labour Party and Trade Council. Fighting on the issue of social reform, especially land, housing and food prices, the party swept into control of the council in November 1919. John was one of those elected for Labour. This victory initiated a second wave of municipal socialist activity, especially in health and famine services. In the next 15 months, the local newspaper, the South Western Star, records a number of John's activities. He supported the proposal that there should be no bar for the admittance of coloured people at events in the halls at the town hall. He chaired the Hands Off Russia Towns meeting. In October, he proposed supporting a resolution of popular council calling for the immediate withdrawal of troops from Ireland, the recognition of the Soviet government, and cessation of military activity in Mesopotamia and Persia, and the revision of the Treaty of Versailles. He supported the decision not to take part in celebrating the League of Nations in November 1920 because it was, quote, nearly a league of the victorious powers in the late war. This was also the period when he was president of the African Progress Union, elected in December 1918. In his inaugural address, he made use of his knowledge of Black history to talk about the colonization of America and African enslavement, the history of the Negro in Africa and ancient Egypt. He cited African Americans from the recent decades with a race contrary point. In February 1919, John attended the Pan-African Congress in Paris, organized by the Boys, attended by Black activists from the United States, the West Indies, Africa, and those living in Britain. At the London session of the 1921 Pan-African Congress, John chaired the session on colonial freedom, at which he introduced the Purdue Sakafala. The Congress Declaration to the World demanded the recognition of civilized men as civilized despite their race in colour, and upheld, quote, the ancient common ownership of the land and its natural fruits and defence against the unrestrained greed of invested capital, and contained forthright criticism of British colonial rule. In 1921, he was succeeded as president of the African Progress Union by the North London GP John Alcindor. John continued to be very active as a poor law guardian. He earned himself the title of the KC for the unemployed because of his rigorous advocacy of the rights to decent poor relief. He condemned as cowardly and brutal the police attack on the 50,000-strong demonstration calling for the release of popular Labour councillors in 1921 who had been imprisoned for refusing to levy the poor law rate. He seems to have triggered the campaigning unemployed to occupy the workhouse in Twarfield Road, Wandsworth, with the red flag flying, in protest at the withdrawal of payments to people in their homes. John commented out angrily that the occupiers included men, quote, wearing silver badges and wound stripes, which a grateful country had presented to take with them into the workhouse. He was a member of a deputation to the Ministry of Health, pressing the case for unemployment to be treated as a national problem. Because of his fight for a generous level of benefit, Guardian's meetings became very heated, and in October 1923, all the Labour members were suspended and John was physically carried out. He chaired the town's meeting in May 1924 as part of a campaign to support the Unemployed Workers' Charter, calling for work and effective maintenance, state workshops and reduced working hours. He expressed surprise that it was necessary for them to be holding a meeting like that with a Labour government in office. He held that the workers had the right to live, not exist. If they had no work, they had a right to be maintained by the state. Today, the unemployed campaign had got to be fought, and it was about time the unemployed put some guts into it. At some time between the end of 1914 and the end of 1922, Margaret seems to have died, although no record of her death has been found. John didn't stand for the council in November 1922, but remained involved in specialist council affairs, especially on health issues, e.g. as a nominee on the Tuberculosis Committee. In 1923, now 60, John remarried to an Englishwoman, Bertha Elizabeth, who was nearly 30 years younger. Having been trustee for the Borough Charities in May 1925, he was reappointed for a further 4 years. He was not elected to the council in November 1925, so he was appointed an alderman. The nature of municipal politics changed dramatically in 1926. In 1921, John had been among those who supported the adoption of the Indian Tripaji Saklavala as parliamentary candidate for Battersea North by the party. Sack was elected in 1922, defeated in 1923. He was also a member of the Communist Party. Re-elected in 1924, he was refused the Parliamentary Labour Party whip and sat as a communist with the support of the Battersea Party. Because of that defiance, the National Party disaffiliated it in February 1926. The party continued business as usual. Then came the general strike in May 1926. Sack was in prison for sedition, calling on troops not to fire on strikers. The police found a letter to the communist leadership arguing for the destruction of the Labour Party. When this was published at the end of the strike, it led to Battersea Party splitting. John took a leading role in setting up new organisations affiliated to the National Party. He became the first secretary of the new Divisional Labour Party in North Battersea and of the new Battersea Labour Party and Trades Council. The disaffiliated party organisations existed for a few years, continuing to back Saklavala, but members of both were on the council. Between 1926 and 28, he represented the council at several national and international health conferences on sanitation, public health, tuberculosis and the dairy industry. He also represented the council at a meeting to discuss the Metropolitan Common Poor Fund. In 1928 or 9, the officially recognised North Battersea Labour Party shared John's premises at 214 Battersea Park Road. In 1929, John was agent for the official Labour candidate, William Stephen Sanders, who had been a key figure in helping Burns put the Progressive Alliance together. They defeated Tekle. It was an acrimonious campaign. That year, another black parliamentary election Labour agent was Bill Miller in Plymouth. Bertha appears to have left John in 1929 and set up the Younger Man. John was Labour agent for the LCC election in 1931. He was elected to the council for 9 Elms Ward in 1931 and made Labour's deputy leader, collapsing at a council meeting. A long period of illness set in. His brother Arthur came down from the Wirral area to be at John's hospital bedside and was with him as he died on Thursday the 14th of July 1932. He remained for the funeral and presumably to wind up John's affairs. At the funeral, local children sang the Dies Irae and 4 priests officiated at the Mass. He was buried at Malden Cemetery. In the council debate that followed the report of his death, several of his Conservative political opponents were magnanimous towards him. The council named one of the blocks of flats Archer House on its new St John's estate, now Battersea Village. Now, we know nothing about John's cultural life. I assume he would have attended concerts conducted by Coleridge Taylor up to his death in September 1912, and possibly concerts of his music afterwards. Did he go to see the black shows like the West End smash hit in Homie and Meet the Cast? Did he watch Laura Bowman and Peter Hampton perform on musical stages, listen to their many recordings, and perhaps visit them at their pre-First World War home in Collier's Wood? These are questions we will probably never know the answers to. Because he and Margaret had no children, because no archive of his papers survived, there is so much about John's life we will never know about, but the research continues. He has been increasingly recognised at the former John Archer Secondary School, John Archer Way across the railway line near Trinity Road, plaques at Brynmere and Battersea Park Roads, the Royal Mail stamp, the modern painting in Liverpool Town Hall, his renovated grave, and a new primary school. Let's hope that the council leaves a proposal for a statue will happen.